Welcome, fellow wildlife avengers, to the Conservationists Assemble. My name is Jonny Bloxham, but here I am known as my alter ego, Captain Conservation, your friendly neighbourhood animal advocate. I am a former zookeeper with a passion for conservation education and the global efforts for threatened species and habitats around the world. I am inviting you to join me as we take the fight to our planet's biggest villain and my arch nemesis, extinction. Whether you're new to animal advocacy or a veteran in wildlife preservation, this is the podcast for you. Each week, I'll be teaming up with one of Earth's mightiest wildlife heroes to unify the greatest collaboration of conservationists ever known, where we will be discussing our planet's epic species and what is being done to save them. This is the Conservationists Assemble. Will you join the fight? Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Conservationists Assemble. How have you all been? What experiences with nature or thoughts about wildlife have you had this week? Maybe you visited a zoo or heard some wildlife news that sparked an emotion and got you thinking. If this is you and you want to share, you can join the conversation by email or message on Instagram, both of which I've included in the show notes. As probably with all of us, my week has mainly involved everything Christmas related, be it Christmas jumper day at work, purchasing the last Christmas presents and putting up the tree. And it might not come as a surprise, but there's very much a heavy wildlife influence in decorating our tree. And of course that means having a Christmas movie on in the background while the tree goes off. Started off strong with The Grinch. Let me know some of your favourite Christmas movies. Today's episode is the podcast's first of hopefully many episodes focused on the all too often overlooked taxonomic groups of animals. I'm talking your reptiles, amphibians, fish and invertebrates. And of course there are your charismatic and iconic species within these groups that will get episodes like your Komodo dragons, sharks, giant tortoises. But there are so many that don't get the spotlight. And today's focal species very much falls into that category. Yes, they have conservation actions in place, but they are housed under human care in just a handful of institutions globally, and outside of that, how many people can say they've heard of the Northern River Terrapin? Let me know in the comments if this species was on your radar before the episode, or if listening has introduced you to this species. Joining me now is Dr. Doris Preininger to narrate the origin story for Batagur baska by introducing them to the podcast and the conservation actions centred on their survival. Doris, thank you for joining me today on the Conservationists Assemble podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here. How are you?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. I'm excited to have you here talking today about the Northern River Terrapin, which is a species, I'll be honest, that I'm not too clued up on. So I'm excited to learn a lot about them, and hopefully our listeners will be excited too. But before we get into that, could you just tell us who you are, where you work and what your role is?
I'm a scientist at the Vienna Zoo in Austria. So I work in Vienna and I'm a herpetologist that has been studying frogs, so amphibians and reptiles for most of my scientific career.
Fantastic. And how long have you been involved with Vienna Zoo?
Since 2013. So 11 years now. Time flies.
And it's what an institution to be involved in. You know, it's full of rich history, and I'm sure it's a great institution to work at. I visited for the first time a couple of years ago and had a really great time wandering around. It's such a lovely place. But yeah, we're here to talk about the Northern River Terrapin. So before we get into the conservation actions that are taking place to maintain a future for them, could you just give us a background on this species, please?
Well, since I've been involved in the project only for 10 years, the species itself, I think, has been considered before my time in the project as two species, actually. So there were two species that were both called Batagur baska, And Peter Braschak, a colleague of mine who always also works in Austria, has been studying and involved in turtle conservation his whole life, basically. And he discovered that Batagur baska actually are two species, and being critically endangered at the time that I got to know the turtle or the terrapin, with the information that these are two species made the conservation status even more critical because it's basically I think at 2010 when we started the project, there were only few individuals left. And these are large freshwater turtles that also swim all the way down to the ocean, so they can tolerate brackish water. They are in water, I would say 95% of the time. They surface to come to feed on mangrove forest or leaves or all kinds of insects and yeah, up to shrimp and crab and whatever they can catch, I guess. And otherwise, they swim around the ocean and also along the rivers. They lay their nests on sand beaches and the problem is that reproductively active starts at the age of 25. So this individual needs to survive a long time until it can basically become reproductively active and produce offspring, which is done only once a year. And also every female, as far as we know, lays only one nest. So this makes the whole status even more critical. And then there's, of course, a lot of habitat loss that's concerned with the species and their life. And it's hard for them to survive in the natural habitat, basically.
Yeah, it's funny. Terrapin's a bit of an interesting word for the name of a species because correct me if I'm wrong, but most people would associate terrapins with kind of being no bigger than the size of your hand. So to then see a Batagur which can grow up to 60 centimeters is
Yeah.
quite impressive and probably goes against what most people would understand as a terrapin.
Yeah, I must say I'm not sure where the distinction of turtle and terrapin and all that comes along 100%, but it is considered the Northern River Terrapin. And the Southern River Terrapin was the species, or is the species, that was used to be altogether Batagur. Now they have been genetically divided, and it's called a terrapin. And it's large, yes. Females can get really big and really heavy, and the males are usually a little bit smaller. And the older they get, the heavier they get, hopefully.
Yeah, and so in terms of only becoming sexually mature at 25, what is the overall lifespan for one of these? If should they reach a full life?
I have no idea. Seriously, I cannot tell you that, and I don't think that information is available uh,
Wow.
because that means that you have to really know when the individual is born
Yeah.
and how long it survived, and also the information that they get reproductively active around the age of 25. We are not 100% sure. We know from an individual that we received from a local villager who got them as a baby. And this individual is now in our conservation area, and
Mhm.
she laid eggs for the first time at the age of 22.
Right.
So even the reproductively activity can be earlier. It is said that some individuals that are already 10 are able to reproduce, but I have never experienced that. The only experience I really have is that 22-year-old female where we're sure that that individual has nested.
Mm.
Long this individual lives is also hard to say, even if I able to live long enough to know. This might be different because we feed them, we keep them, we take good care of them, so they are not under 100% natural conditions in the form of having no predators, really. Well, to a
So
point.
so there really is a lot left to learn about this
Oh,
species.
100%, yes.
So, in terms of where they're found, then you say that the one in your conservation care has come from a villager. Where would this villager have sourced one from, or where would they be found naturally?
No, they naturally probably they are caught. They are caught in nets. when they go fishing. They are
Hmm.
also brought to village ponds, so all small villages throughout Bangladesh and also India and the area where the terrapin lives at. Villages have small water reservoirs, more or less. And people either keep them as talisman in these water reservoirs. So they keep the water clean, of course. They eat away all the mosquitoes and things like that. But they also keep them because they eat them. So at festive events, eventually one of the terrapins is then slaughtered. I don't know, the village head has its birthday or something
Hmm.
like that. Somebody important gets married. And this is what were these terrapins being kept for in these ponds, where actually Peter and a colleague of him found the individuals that eventually started our insurance colony in Bangladesh.
And so, yeah, I suppose we should probably touch on Peter a bit more then, because I imagine we're probably going to talk about him a bit. So Peter is or he works alongside his dad with Turtle Island in
I think
Austria.
all his life, yes. So
Right. And so,
eventually started Turtle Island. So they've been keeping, rescuing, conserving turtles and terrapins all over the world, basically, and tried to engage closely into that work, try to raise their own individuals, try to breed them, find out a lot about breeding conditions and all that. And this is not only concerned with Batagur. Eventually, Peter created an organization that is called Turtle Island, which is now also a zoo that houses hundreds of species of turtles and terrapins and brings up more and more information. And throughout his scientific career at the university,
mhm.
he heavily worked on the system of Batagur baska, so on genetics and discovering the individuals, where are we really still able to find them? And eventually he donated to the Vienna Zoo with his father, Batagur baska. And exactly these donated individuals were laid eggs a couple months after he donated them. And the zoo was actually able to hatch two of the eggs, which was very difficult because seriously, we knew nothing. No temperature, how moist are the
Mm.
eggs supposed to be kept, and things like that. And that really gave us a lot of media echo that this was possible. And then it was possible, together with Peter, to go directly into the country of origin where the terrapin is from and do something right there. And Peter already knew people there. Peter had done surveys before there, and he knew a local person. Her name is Rupali. She comes from India but speaks Bengali because
Hmm.
she's from Calcutta. So this was extremely helpful to get in touch with people to find out if there are still individuals around. And sadly, the whole monitoring system yielded no results whatsoever. So later on, this is what I talked about before, is where we found the remaining individual was either on markets where they were or in village ponds. And this, together with the zoo, we bought these individuals back from either villages or the markets and brought them into a conservation breeding station, the first one that was then able to create new individuals eventually. And this was done together with the forest department. So all these individuals belong to the forest department of
Hmm.
Bangladesh that we have in Bangladesh, and also the conservation breeding stations the area belongs to Bangladesh, and they are donating it year after year for the project. And the zoo and Turtle Island is doing kind of all of the other work around that.
Yeah, so initially you came on board, or as an organisation, you came on board to provide recommendations for improved husbandry conditions and also, like you said, the crucial funding. Um, and that initial, when Peter donated the original one to you, and she laid and hatched. Um, in terms of then trying to replicate that going forward, what would you have to consider so that you could learn what the optimal conditions for their breeding cycle would be?
Well, I think the most interesting thing was humidity. how dry or moist do the eggs have to be. Temperature in the zoo could be controlled through incubators, basically. So we kept them at 28.5 degrees Celsius, which was common knowledge for Batagur affinis, the other
Okay.
species that used to be within the Batagur genus, and or still is in Batagur genus, but was considered previously the same species. And but now we kind of know that 28 degrees Celsius probably only produces male. Yeah, so there's a temperature sex determinations depending on how in certain phases of the egg development. So it takes about 60 to 70 days for eggs to hatch, and we are gathering that in the middle of these 60 days, so from day 20 to 40, you need 30 to 33 degrees to produce females, and
Sure.
everything that's lower will produce males. These possibilities we don't have in the field. Yeah, well,
Hmm.
there's no electricity, there's no incubators available. This is all not replicable. But we can look for beach areas that have a certain humidity or dryness in the sand, and the females already do that while laying the eggs. Yeah, so we incubate directly on the nesting beaches that we created, basically. All we do is we put them in crates and put them under cages to protect them from predators because
Sure.
the eggs, everybody can smell them. Yeah.
Hmm.
So monitor lizards, civet cats, everybody checks those beaches. Yeah. All the time to look for the eggs. So this is what we then basically do. And eventually, we also check the conditions of the sand, maybe put some loose sand over it, maybe open the boxes that we keep them a little bit to let them dry out, to let them get air, things like that. And we monitor the temperatures as they are under these conditions. There's hardly anything you can do with temperature. You could probably lay some glass on it or cover it more, but you have to be very careful because a day of sun will create immense temperatures, and then
Hmm.
eventually you will produce dead eggs and not warm eggs, yeah, or something like that. So we leave it as it is, as the conditions are, because that's what they get when they lay in the field also, right?
And I suppose then, in terms of just trying to learn about them, so that you can make a plan for boosting population numbers as best possible, knowing that they can only lay one clutch of eggs a year, what challenges does that patience, or what challenges does that minimal window of laying once a year bring to the table?
Well, it means that all the station staff has to be there around the clock, basically, which is not 100% possible. Then beaches have to be checked every day. Yeah. So basically, people walk over the beaches to make the sand straight, kind
Hmm.
of. So we immediately see tracks from the turtles on the next day. Yeah. There's a period of about 2 to 3 weeks where where the females will come out of the water and make tracks every day. So basically looking for good laying areas. Yeah. And they will cover the beach and run around several times and go back into the water. Nothing happens. But when a nest is laid, it looks different than just tracks. You have to imagine all of a sudden there's a heap of sand. And this is when the station staff has to come in immediately the next day, dig out those eggs, measure the eggs, put them in containers, put them again in the sand, and protect them with the cages. And then we start measuring temperature, and then the waiting for the next 60 to 70 days starts. Yeah. Eggs are checked sometimes. Yeah. So we, at the end, especially, we have the station staff kind of smell into it. If it's still okay, a foul nest you will recognize quite easily. In the past 5 years, we immensely checked for ants. We already cut a lot of trees before the nesting season because there are fig trees, and fig trees bring a lot of ants. Ants again get into the nest. We also started to work with plastic boxes that are fully covering the eggs, kind of. So put sand in those plastic boxes, then put the eggs, then close them completely. These have to be left open every second day to get enough air in to have that working. So there's a lot of things we do, or we have to do for those 60 to 70 days, and that has to be monitored. And then hopefully one day you open the box and there's somebody looking at you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can imagine that's a very rewarding day
No,
when
that's
yeah,
nice.
there's
Yeah.
a little face peering at you. And you mentioned obviously the conservation breeding centers in Bangladesh, and I think when we started corresponding about you coming on the podcast, you not long just returned from the
Yeah.
Bangladesh site yourself. So from the outset, it seemed like any populations discovered within their native home range were to be kept in their native countries where possible. And we are seeing a huge focus on community engaged conservation in modern day conservation actions. So, what does the Northern River Terrapin and this project mean to local Bangladesh people?
Well, the people who work on the project, basically it means work, right? So they have, I think, developed a considerable empathy for the animals. Yeah. They treat them very nicely. They care for them. They feed them a lot. And also they observe them a lot. It's amazing to see how the keepers react and realize problems before they even happen. Yeah, so there's a terrapin that is a lot on the surface, what's going on. They catch them, they weigh them, they tell me about it. She's bloated, maybe she got the wrong food, or a crab attacked her, so she has a broken leg or something like that. So observation is key. And all the keepers really understand that, and also the station managers. What it brings to the bigger community is probably an individual that's from, or a species that's from their country they can be proud of, that the rest of the world doesn't have. So especially the conservation station, the second one that we created, which is close to the large Sundarban area, the mangrove forest, it's a tourist attraction. And although the people cannot go directly to the pond and touch the turtle or anything, there's a lot of information we provide that this is basically a species that only exists in very little countries, and their country is one of them. Other than that, I must say this is one of the poorest countries on this planet. Yeah. And people are concerned with other things than the conservation of this terrapin. Yeah. And you have to, as a conservationist, as a scientist, you have to recognize that. You have to understand that it's not all about your turtle. You cannot make people do whatever you want, basically change their life in a way that starving, that to just make your species survive.
Sure.
So it's a lot of information that you have to provide, a lot of talking that you have to do, and a lot of that is thankfully done by partners. So we have somebody on the project who has a TV station. Um, they come on the tour, they come to the station, they film some Batagur, they provide that information on TV, in the news, so and so many hatched. And this, I think, provides motivation for their own species in their own country, not only some species far away that somebody else is conserving, basically. But I think what provides the most interest is if you give the people in the country not only work, but also when we do construction, when we need something, when we need help or something like that, you simply get some people to work with the species, to have their daily food and wages provided by a turtle, a terrapin, basically, yeah, by conserving the individuals.
Yeah, I think that's a really, good thing to acknowledge all of the different components that go into it, and how there are, lots of different elements. So, but the importance of this species to the local community does show in the results because, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was a very small amount of individuals that were found initially, and now like you've mentioned, you've got the two established conservation stations in Bangladesh. Since 2010, over 400 juveniles have been hatched, and
Actually, over 700.
over 700 now. So it's really quite a conservation success story in that sense.
Yes, it is for us, definitely, especially with the little money that that project actually, I mean, over the years, of course, it's a lot of money, but looking at other conservation
Mm.
projects and fighting for not paying anybody, everybody who's a partner doesn't get money. Yeah, everybody does it for the turtle. So seriously, we have done a lot of work to get every penny into the turtle. Yeah, to provide food, to provide stuff, to provide research, things like that, and not to pay overhead for, I don't know, any other agencies that need to buy a pencil. I don't care. Everybody needs to buy their own pencils. Yeah. Yeah.
And now, obviously, fast forward, you've got to the stage where prior to the pandemic, you managed, or the project managed to release some terrapins, and that showed that they've been able to find their own food in their natural habitat and gain weight, and so it's laying that groundwork for yeah, hopefully that continued success.
Yeah, I think we showed that the sundarbans are still a viable habitat for the turtles. So that river mangrove system that spans really over large parts of Bangladesh and also India would work if there would be no fishery. Yeah,
Hmm.
this is really the problem. So we satellite tagged individuals. In total, it was 20, 10 males and 10 juveniles eventually over the period of 3 years and release them into the Sandaban system. We also put some phone numbers. Yeah, so we put little cards on it where it says, if you find this turtle or if you catch this turtle, could you call this number and please return it to us? Yeah. And we actually, through that, got some turtles alive back, and all of them gained weight during the period outside. And that was amazing, really. Yeah. That these turtles not only covered a large area, of I think over 1,300 square kilometers. So this is almost the size of London that they
Mm.
swam within 3 months. But they also gained weight during this time. The other thing is that the majority of turtles were lost, and the longest they were swimming was 3.5 months. Then all the turtles were either returned to the station by force of catching them, not by
Hmm.
us getting them, or they were caught or slaughtered or I don't know, drowned somewhere where we found only the carapace, only the shell on the beach or something like that. One turtle swam all the way to India. The Indian Forest Department got it, re-released it, and 36 days that turtle was dead found dead on the beach of in India. So the situation or the outlook for simply rewilding individuals into the Sundarban system is a river system is devastating. I would
Hmm.
not do it. We do not produce enough individuals per year to compensate for that quick of a loss.
Sure.
So yes, the habitat is still a viable population system for them to survive. But no, because of fishery or fishing seasons that where there are nets laid out that are large or extensive, that really cover one side of the river to the other side of the river for people to seriously survive and make their living. Yeah. And it's not that I think that the people are targeting Batagur
Hmm.
baska, but it's a bycatch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of any shrimp, of any fish, of anything they do, the turtle eventually drowns in the nets and cannot survive because the nets are put up for a whole day or even for some days. And when the turtle gets in there, a lot of times the nets will be not checked in time for the turtle to survive. So this is an immense problem. And this is also a problem that the Vienna Zoo or Neither Turtle Island or Batagur is able to solve because
Hmm.
here you have to target large, I mean, massive areas. Yeah. I mean, really think of the size of London. How are you going to say that no, there's no people supposed to go there. There's no big ships supposed to drive there. We need to conserve the turtle. This is not possible. So the other thing that happened when it comes to rewilding is that the forest department told us they have around 80 to 90 stations around the Sundarbans. And these are tiny forest stations where 2 to 5 forest department staff are working there for a period of almost 2 years at a time, and from where they check fishery, check the area, take care of people, and things like that. And all of these areas have a pond. And all of these areas are directly in the mangrove forest, really far apart from urban life or from humans, and some of them at least. And this is when we asked if we could soft release the turtles into these ponds. So basically distribute them throughout the Sundarbans, but
Hmm.
into ponds that are protected by forest department staff. So nobody can fish there. Nobody's allowed to go there and fish, neither the fish that are in this pond nor our turtle. The turtle is really close to the river system. So if the turtle wants to walk over into
Hmm.
the river, basically, and disperse, it is able to. The forest department staff will not stop them, and the turtle is not fed in there. So this is a natural system that has vegetation. We said, okay, if you want to throw in some cabbage once in a while, sure, because these are again, we let the forest staff release the turtle.
Hmm.
So again, people engage people in what you're doing. Yeah. Then you have to imagine these people sit there all day long, have nothing to do basically. So everybody watches that pond and looks for the turtle's head to come up and things like that. So there's a lot of information that comes from these people. Oh, the turtles are still in there. The turtles look for food. Of course, some of things are stories, but also they are really concerned about the individuals. And I think this gives us a chance to kind of release the stations from the pressure we are getting with having so many individuals, and on the other side, creating several populations throughout the river system where the turtles can freely move when they are reproductively active at one point into the system, and we can distribute them with still safeguarding them somehow through the forest department stuff. We've checked, so we started releasing into 3 stations first, and checked these 3 stations by going there with about 20 fishers because it's large ponds, and basically fished out the turtles that we put in a half year before, and
Hmm.
all turtles gained weight. So everybody was still in there, nobody, so it seems to be a lot of site fidelity going on. Everybody could have walked off
Hmm.
because there are no fences to those ponds, but everybody was still in there and everybody gained weight. So we thought that's a good idea, but now we have 111 turtles out there in 16 different stations. Next year is again a check year, so we will select some stations, check again. If there is really some concerning issues that turtles lose weight, we might as well pack them on the boat, take them back to the breeding station. Or if it continues to be as good in that they gain a lot of weight, we can put more turtles into these ponds to understand also limits of the ponds,
Hmm.
understand limits of how the generations can exist next to each other. But it seems to be no problems. Adults do not attack the young ones. They are rather attacked by some crabs that wander into that system because, of course, you have a lot of flooding, cyclones consistently cover the country. So whatever happens here, we cannot intervene. We can only say they are definitely protected by the forest department, and the forest department staff is happy doing that. That's also an issue. That's not always easy to find. Yeah.
Hmm. So, in terms then of ex situ populations, because there isn't a huge ex situ population, I think there's maybe around 10 establishments, and I believe that Peter oversees kind of an EASA ex situ breeding program for a variety of Batagur genus,
Yeah.
or species. Um, is there kind of an insurance population, or are they purely kind of ambassadors for and for kind of learning more about the breeding cycles as opposed
Yeah.
to maybe supplementing wild populations down the line?
Okay, so yes, the Batagur baska is definitely an ambassador at the
Hmm.
Vienna Zoo. Peter definitely breeds them almost every year. The eggs are not always successful, but he had a lot of successes. Our Batagur, we have now the younger ones, so we keep on trading for and back with Peter to make the shovel work, kind of, to have the adult males or the adult females in different compilations, kind of, together and give them some time out. So this is a collaborative work. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
not the Vienna Zoo shows that and
Sure.
this Peter Braschak. It's everybody's in on the same project and everybody is really working for the same goal, basically. And the other thing is also to provide ambassadors for other zoos, right?
Hmm.
So it's difficult to trade the individuals, so it can be
Sure.
traded between zoos, but there is no commercial trade allowed, thank God, anymore
Hmm.
for the turtle. It's immensely difficult to get anything out of Bangladesh to support Indian
Yeah.
projects. Yeah, that's a big deal, basically.
And
And
we kind of mentioned that there was a pause in work due to the pandemic. Did this have any kind of major negative effects on the project, or did kind of post pandemic has everything kind of picked back up as it was?
no, we were in the middle of the satellite transmitter release. And basically, since we lost or we got the most individuals returned after a couple months, that satellite project stopped for almost 2 years because
Hmm.
none of us could go down there.
Sure.
We weren't allowed to travel in Austria, basically. So the juvenile release of 10 juveniles happened after the pandemic, and the adult release of 10 adult males happened before the pandemic, basically. But it was still possible to track all the released animals consistently. And then also after the pandemic, when we in 22, when we were 2022, when we were allowed to travel to Bangladesh again. It's a challenge to travel to Bangladesh. It was this year. There was a lot of uproar in the government. I'm not
Sure.
sure if you heard. So it's always difficult, and but the pandemic there was no option
Hmm.
for
Of
us to
course.
go. Yeah.
Of course. And so looking forward, then what are the next steps for kind of continued success? Obviously, you say you check next year's a check year. What are kind of the next steps to ensure continued success for this species?
Well, the one of the next steps is definitely keep on doing what we're doing. Actually, breeding time is again really important. It starts in well, breeding time starts now basically, but the egg laying is in March and March, April, and this is always hot season for us. What's going to happen? We have new protective covers in one of the stations against the ants, so we keep on working against this. We had large renovations done on the hatcheries now because in the monsoon country,
Hmm.
everything decomposes basically, and we're gonna keep on going with the soft release since this is hopefully our way for Batagur baska. We probably work on a new hatchery. We have now ground floors, so kind of muddy floors, also
Hmm.
for the babies. So not those concrete pools that you usually see in hatcheries because I think all the bacteria and everything that is in there prepares the turtle better for infections. And we have 4 and 4 females in the 2 stations and different males with that. And they were all tested according to relatedness. So it's really important to keep the groups different to produce
Sure.
some sort of genetic diversity in the offspring. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I suppose even though they're not necessarily being used to supplement genetics, it's still important that that's maintained for that ambassador program. Um, so I think we've kind of delved nicely into the successes of the project and what's going to ensure it keeps going moving forward. Now we're just going to take a quick look into your career and background and how you got to where you are. So to kick that off, Doris, could you just give us an insight into your journey as to how you got to where you are today?
Well, I wanted to work with animals and really didn't know which ones. So started to study zoology eventually at the university and discovered frogs for my passion eventually. And with amphibians, reptiles are not far, really.
Hmm.
And I worked with food flagging frogs. So the frogs I worked with for my PhD, they communicate with the hind leg with visual signals. And the zoo, for the first time, established a food flagging program. So we got food flagging frogs from Brunei, so from the island of Borneo, and into the zoo, and started a breeding colony. And we're the first zoo that did that, basically, and have now greatly working scientific project, not only, but I think around 500, 600 food flagging frogs that are in more or less research project that works together with the United States, with Great Britain, Germany, and a lot of other countries on visual communication. And this is really how I got into the zoo. And I worked here a long time to establish that food flagging project. And eventually, when I finished my PhD, the Vienna Zoo asked me if I don't want to keep on working here. And I happily said yes, actually. And this is how eventually I got to my boss that I work for, which is
Hmm.
Anton Weissenbacher, close friend of Peter Braschak. He's the head of the aquarium house, the rainforest house, the desert house. So a lot of reptiles and amphibians there. And this is also what started me off working with Batagur baska. Now I do every year. I travel to Bangladesh every year, and it's, I think, a third of my work here is goes for the conservation project, really.
And just talk us through that, maybe that first trip to Bangladesh or your first experience with Bataga.
Well, my first trip to Bangladesh was with Peter Braschak, who introduced me not only to the project but also to Bangladesh. I've been working in India quite a lot. Bangladesh was a trip harder than to make to India because when you arrive in Dhaka, you don't see any area where a river terrapin could live, yeah, until you get further south or into the conservation project. And this is where, for the first time, I understood what it means to work in conservation,
Hmm.
and that it means sometimes fighting against windmills, so that it means getting your message across is not the message that people are interested in
Sure.
necessarily. And I think Peter had a long experience before I came along, so I was happy to learn from that and still am. And are now, I think I traveled there so many times that I know what I'm getting into and that I know what I'm responsible for and that I'm responsible for a whole conservation project of that terrapin. And that is really important for me, and this is what I'm there for.
So then, in terms of maybe, if you would consider Peter an influence or a mentor in your career and obviously your time in Bangladesh as some of the lessons that your role has taught you, what now then advice would you give to someone looking to pursue a career in conservation?
Well, find the middle way between getting attached to the animals too much and your love for the species and for the work that you want to do. You have to, at one point, distance yourself. Otherwise, I think I learned that already with frogs. You become the helpless helper.
Hmm.
And this is not, you're not going to be helpful then anymore. Yeah. There's also battles to fight and battles to stay away from where you are have no chances. Yeah.
Hmm.
Keep your focus on the species, try to do what you can do, but there are other people than you too. And you have to get the bigger picture. Yeah. Feel responsible for what you do, but take your time off the responsibility too. Otherwise, everything will get too emotional and too difficult. Conservation is a fine line that you're walking, yeah,
Hmm.
between success and total failure, yeah, most of the time from day to day, yeah. So
Yeah.
great news, we bred so and so many species. One is really sick, and somebody has caught two others in a net, yeah. You have to keep the balance also in your heart, kind of.
And then from, breeding the feet flagging frogs to the Batagur project, what are some of your proudest achievements to date?
That's a good question. I think it's a combination of everything. Doing the science, getting the information out of it is definitely what I do. Yeah. So finding out more about Batagur, finding out more about the species is, I think you have to be an educated person to be able to conserve something. You have to know your species to be able to conserve it. It sounds so easy, but it's really
Mm.
hard thing to do. Um, so getting the data, I think, is what I'm most proud of. Yeah. And it's sometimes it's with only the last of their kind, and sometimes it's with many. I
Hmm.
think it's when people ask me things like, why are you interested in that? Or what do we gain from that? That's horrible questions. For me, every single information that we can learn from nature is important because I don't think that we are apart from, we are not, we cannot separate ourselves. We
Sure.
are nature. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
to gain more information is something for itself. Yeah. Might it be important for medicine? Might it be important for conserving the ecosystem? Might it be important for the young child who sees a turtle from Bangladesh for the first time? It doesn't matter to me.
And in terms of you say it's a fine line, and sometimes those kind of steps towards success come few and far between. What gives you motivation?
Well, I think understanding that we cannot go back in this on this planet to give the freedom to all the animals helped a lot in motivating me to provide what we are able to. It doesn't matter if it comes with experiments or with everything we do is new. I think especially the community I work in understands very well that we cannot simply free everything, but we need to try to understand what animals, what species we can still do something for. Where do we have options? Where can we really dig out those options to make a difference? Not me as a person make a difference. We as a community make a difference. We as people make a difference, or we as zoos make a difference. Yeah. Because this is all one large organization where one steps in for the other, right? It's not one Vienna Zoo, it's the Prague Zoo, it's the London Zoo, it's
Hmm.
modern zoos work all for the same thing, and that is everybody tries to conserve or protect something else and make a difference. That's why we go to work every day.
Absolutely, and it's very, yeah, I absolutely agree. It's very motivating when you see this collaboration of international organizations all fighting for a common goal.
I think the teamwork is the clue, right? Nobody on this planet would make a huge difference by doing everything themselves, and nobody can do everything himself. One person is better in that one. One person is better in getting the data. The other is better in communicating, things like that, right?
Sure,
So yeah.
absolutely. So yeah, I think with that question, you've given us a lovely insight into your career and what you're all about, what makes you tick, and what you enjoy getting out of the work you do. So we're just going to finish up the episode with some light-hearted questions. So you've obviously got that keen interest in your lower vertebrates. Are there any dream species that you'd love to work with or you'd love to see in the wild?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've just been to Komodo, so I've seen the Komodo dragons this August. That was amazing.
Amazing.
I also like to see the other big ones. So the Goliath frog, maybe in Africa, but
Hmm.
again, Cameroon is hard to visit.
Sure.
Or the giant salamanders that are still out there. These are things that, but the other thing is that we as a tourist
Mm,
biologist, we don't need to step everywhere. Yeah.
sure.
So
Yeah.
it's a thing of, yes, I want to see them, but do I really have to?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so
And
keep out of some habitats is also something good.
yeah. So then after obviously you talked about how, taking breaks away from the work is
Mm.
beneficial. After a day fighting extinction, how do you relax?
Hmm. Um, a computer to prepare for the next day. I'm a very organized and prepared person, although my all my preparation sometimes totally doesn't work out the next day. And Diet Coke is great. A cold Diet Coke, which is not
Lovely.
always available in Bangladesh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And in terms of listeners keeping up to date with the work surrounding Batagur, how can they follow the project and keep up to date with the latest developments?
Oh, the Vienna Zoo has information on all kinds of social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and a homepage. Also, some YouTube videos once in a while, whenever we are able to film, get enough film to make longer stories. So, basically, just Google Batagur baska, and you will get a lot of information already from the Vienna Zoo or from Peter's organization, Turtle Island. Yeah.
Fantastic. And do you have any last messages for our listeners?
No, keep up the work. Try to conserve something. There's something you can do basically every day right around the corner. Or inform yourself at your next zoo, basically, where you could participate or where you could help out. There are a lot of citizen conservation projects also going on, usually around the corner, where you can help or do something. And even small things make a great difference if all of us do something.
A great point to finish up on there. So, Doris, thank you so much for your
Thank
time
you.
today and teaming up with me on the podcast. I've certainly learnt a lot. It's great to learn about this not so little terrapin.
You know?
And yeah, I wish you all the best with continued success for the rest of your
Yeah.
career.
And let me know if you ever visit the Vienna Zoo again.
And of course, a huge shout out to you, my fellow wildlife avengers, for tuning in. If you are interested in learning more about this species, you can follow the Vienna Zoo, Turtle Island, the Turtle Survival Alliance, and the Nature and Life Foundation, all of which I have linked in the show notes. Additionally, the 21st of October each year is Reptile Awareness Day, so be sure to add that day to your calendars and keep the less iconic reptiles in mind, as well as the charismatic species. If you enjoyed this volume of the podcast and wish to join the fight, please follow, subscribe and rate the podcast wherever you stream from. This helps us to get the word spread further and keep us bringing you new content. Please also follow on social media to stay up to date with the podcast's latest developments and share with your family and friends to help stack the odds in conservation's favour. Don't forget you can join the fight by joining the conversation. Share your thoughts and suggestions on this episode, past episodes or future episodes via email or Instagram. And if you have been fortunate enough to see a Northern River Terrapin at one of the few institutions that house them and have got some pictures, I would love to share them on the podcast's Instagram page. Be sure to tune in to next week's fantastic episode. Until then, this is Captain Conservation signing off, over and out.